All right. Here we go. Today we've got two topics. We'll probably get through one. The game plan was charity and hope, but probably in reality it will be charity this week and hope next week. Last Sunday feels like a long time ago. Usually weeks don't seem that long, but for some reason, when I think back to last week, that's when Shirley got her hair cut. I do remember that part. So, and you guys feel farther away today than normal. I don't know what, the room's elongated. The tables have elongated. What's that? What now? I got you. I got it. All right, let's pray and do this. Scott, I got it. Lord, thank you for the freedom we have to come and openly worship. Thank you for family, so family visits. Thank you for friendships. Thank you for the truth of Christianity. So you know our stories and you know what we're dealing with. So meet us where we are as we talk about love this morning. Thank you that Lewis C. gets to be our guide as he points to Scripture and he points to Jesus. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Before we get going on this, he's gonna call love charity. And we've talked about the four cardinal virtues. To me, this is part of the greatest part of mere Christianity. Prudence, temperance, justice, and courage. I think that summarizes everything you've got to do in life. Remember, prudence is wisdom. Temperance is knowing what to do, when to do, how to do it, and sort of doing things in balance. Justice is wanting what is right, not only for yourself, but for others. And then courage, either the ability to confront that which is wrong or the ability to hang in there when you know what you're doing is right. And so those four are based on the Catholic Church, and he runs with those, but now he has what he calls theological virtues. Faith, hope, and charity will be the three that he talks about. So we're doing charity first, then hope is the next chapter, and then after that he's got two chapters on faith. Theological virtues he describes as attitudes and actions, this is number 4, that are found particularly in Christians. And the cardinal virtues could be in Christians as well, but he adds these. So he's got then these 7 virtues. When he talked about forgiveness, he talked about love. Remember, your forgiveness is based on loving the other person, and you love them as you love them yourself. And that becomes your motivation, as you wish that when you find that you have done things that are not right, you wish you could be restored, so you wish the same thing for the other person. So now he goes to charity. He says in his culture anyway, charity had gotten to the point where it just meant giving money, giving charity to the poor. And he simply brings it back and says it's the term love. His point's going to be, though, and he's going to make this, it's a pretty simple presentation he's got here. Love is not something you feel, love is something you do. And the feelings may come, but the feelings really aren't the issue. The issue is the attitude, the action. So here he says, number 4 on the bottom of page 1, it's not a state. It is a state, not of the feelings, but of the will. That state of the will, which we have naturally about ourselves, again, he always goes back to yourself. How you feel about yourself is the way that you ought to feel about others, and must learn to have about other people. So it's not something you feel, it's something you decide to do. So you can love somebody you don't like, and that's where he's going to head next. The first thing he's going to say, and anytime you want to say something, please do. First, charity is not affection. It's not just, you don't say you love someone because you feel like you like them. It is interesting to watch, I talked about parents at school, and I would like to think all the parents that I deal with love their children, but it's clear not all of them like their children, which makes for an interesting situation. I've told you about the one kid. I've got his picture in my room, and it was hanging up on this wall. He played basketball, so it was one of those big old fat heads. And kids were saying that his dad doesn't like him. And they were saying he likes us better than he likes his own kid. And I thought, there's just no way. That can't be. Well, the dad walked in for this parent-teacher thing one night, and as he turned around, there was this kid's head. And rather than, the reaction was weird. All I did was cross his arms and go. And I thought, that's your kid, man. So here Lewis is saying it really doesn't matter if you feel this affection for somebody, you can still love them. So I pointed out in chapter, this is number 1 on page 2, on forgiveness that our love for ourselves does not mean that we like ourselves. He says we love ourselves, but we don't always like what we do. Remember what he says. And so we give ourselves benefit of the doubt, hoping that we can be restored, hoping that we can live without whatever it is that we need to forgive ourselves about. And that's how we treat others. It means we wish our own good. That's what's true about charity. This is justice even, that you want what's best for the other person. You wish they're good. You say, but they're not. They're not. I had a dream last night as we were walking in. Kelly and I were walking to pick up this stuff, and I've not been feeling well. So the last couple of nights, I dreamed about swallowing because I had a sore throat. And so all night I felt like I was waking up, and somehow Hitler was in my dream. And I don't know why or where, but Kelly's response when I told her was, "We don't like Hitler." I said, "Oh, we love Hitler," because we've been talking about him in here. So that stuff's been kind of resonating a little bit. And he mentions again, as you look at the faith stuff, I've been working ahead. He mentions again the Nazi Germany, and so it means we wish someone else is good, even our enemy. And so Kelly said we don't like Hitler, and I said, "Do we love Hitler?" She said, "No, probably not. We don't like him." Yeah, it's an interesting thought, but that's where he goes with love. It's wishing, as we wish our own good, we wish their good. So you stop and you ask the question, first of all, are there people who you do not wish they're good? And maybe that's where we start. And I've had people in my life that I have certainly not wished they're good. If they would trip on the sidewalk, I might rejoice quietly and say, "Can I help you?" and then not extend a hand. There are people that I think have been, in my estimation, wicked enough that I would wish God to deal with them harshly, which is a horrible thought as I think about it in retrospect. But who? So I ask this question in class sometimes. I'll say, "Is there anybody that you?" I generally don't ask, "Is there anybody that you wish you would die?" But I will ask, "Is there anybody that if they didn't show up at school tomorrow for one reason or another, you would rejoice?" And the difference usually runs along genders. Guys don't like somebody and they're very open about it and they get in a fight. And then they're pretty much okay because it's out in the open that they don't like each other. Girls will hold it secretly and then there's these grudges. Now that's an over-characterization or whatever the right word is, but often there'll be this, and I'll say, are there people in this school that you would wish harm on? And I'll get these little goofy smiles. Tough way to live. And so you start there. Is there somebody that you would wish evil on? It's important to understand that this natural liking is neither a sin nor a virtue. Just because you like somebody doesn't make it good or bad. You are drawn to some people. You're not drawn to others. I've had one kid over the years who told me he didn't think I liked him. That's not a bad record. But as we talked, the reason he felt like I didn't like him is because I caught him cheating twice. And I said, "It's not I don't like you, I just can't trust you." And so he felt like I didn't like him. Well, because I held him accountable for his cheating. There's another kid that I guess, so there's two kids. Another kid, and we saw him on Friday, had to kick him out of the gym. He was trying to sneak in to play basketball, and we had to kick him out, whatever. And so he snuck to the other gym, and we had to kick him out of that one too. But he doesn't like me because I tease him. I tease everybody. But the friends told me my teasing was too close to the truth. I didn't realize that. I didn't know I'd struck gold. I have to tease them more. So it's neither a sin nor a virtue any more than your likes and dislikes in food or a sin or a virtue. So some people you're drawn to. That's not a bad thing. Some people you're not drawn to. It is what it is. I mean, you talk about friendships. You can only have a certain amount of really close friends anyway. You are drawn to some people more than others. But of course, what you do about it is either sinful or virtuous. So natural liking or affection for people makes it easier to be charitable. If you like somebody, it's easier to love them. So it's necessary to keep a lookout for fear. Our liking for one person makes us uncharitable or even unfair to someone else. That's another question. I'll ask kids at school, can you tell which, I try to be open, but we all got our stuff. Can you tell which teachers like you and don't like you? And how do they treat you differently? And so there are two kids that went into a room one day, and they're both wearing the same illegal sweatshirt. And the teacher really liked one and not the other. The one she liked didn't get a detention. The one she didn't like did. But they had on the exact same clothes. Now, that's pretty funny, I think. I said, it's just that you'll survive. But he says, be on the lookout that we're not treating those who we like better than those we don't necessarily like. There are even cases where our liking conflicts with our charity towards the person we like. So he says there are even people we like, but in liking them, what we really do is do them a disservice. So I, a doting mother, may be tempted by natural affection to spoil her child, that is, to gratify her own affectionate impulses at the expense of the child's real happiness later on. That is, I like my child, therefore my actions really aren't of love, even though I say they are. Yeah, that bug was over here, Jerry. I think you got it, I didn't. I whispered into its ear. I said, get the man with wispy hair. And it went, zoom. Would you rather kill a fly or kill a mockingbird? Never? My son was once out in the backyard, and he had this BB gun, and he shot a blue jay. He didn't think he'd get it, and he killed it. And he was so upset, he hid the body and didn't tell me until last week. That was like 10 years ago. He said, I knew you'd be mad. But yeah, so to kill a blue jay. Blue jays? I had a pet blue jay for a while. Did you? Yeah, I'll tell you that story later. If we get bored in church today, we'll step outside, get donuts, and I'll tell you. All right, so a parent may say, I love my child because they really like them, but their actions are really the opposite of that. So you may actually harm somebody that you really like, and it's not love, it's something else. I mean, we see that with parents all the time, with some of the things they do to their kids, and we're like, this isn't helping them. Therefore, it would be quite wrong to think that the way to become charitable is to sit trying to manufacture affectionate feelings. So he's saying, don't make it into feelings. So it's okay if you don't like everybody. That'd be an interesting question. Who don't you like? Who do you like? Why do you like certain people? Why not like certain people? So charity is an action. This is top of page 3. That leads to affection. Now, I don't know if I'm going to agree with the second part that much, but I could be wrong. He is C.S. Lewis after all. Charity is an action that leads to affection. Here's the rule. Don't waste time about whether you love your neighbor. Just act like you did. So I don't think you act like you like them. I think you just do things to them that are loving. I still don't think you have to like everybody, but you have to treat them in ways that are loving. And his argument then becomes, if you do that, look at C. When you are behaving as if you love someone, you will presently come to love him. And I think that in general the principle is probably true, but I don't think it's always true. There's people you don't like, huh? All right.
No, but I think if you say that you presently come to love him, I think the only way that I come to love someone that hasn't been on my life is that God working things in my heart and also showing me some things about myself, but it's not anything that I did that eventually I got to the love part.
Right. So Robin's saying if she begins to love someone who's on her not like list, it's because God's changed her heart. Yeah, and it's not just because she's acting in certain ways. And here comes Jary, the bug killer.
And often that comes about through prayer. When
Yes.
you start praying for people.
That's good.
God has an open
Yeah.
channel.
Jary, the elder, adds, and it often comes through prayer and tithing to the church. You said that, right? That's what you meant? Often through prayer, of course. Yes. Chris.
We go through hills and valleys, like even in our faith, and sometimes, even though our heart isn't in it, as long as if we keep repeating the actions, like you keep coming to church on Sunday, I think we do eventually re-engage.
I think that's it. She's saying we go hills and valleys. Sometimes our heart's not in it. We re-engage. That's true of everything, though, right?
Right.
There are times you like your job, times you don't like your job, times you think your dad's great, times you think, what a dummy, drink some water. We had a water discussion earlier today. And so I think that's true. We are sort of this way. And people come and go, and we like them and we don't like them. But the command is that we love them. And love is not an affection. It's not how you feel. It's how you act. Love is a choice. It's an act of the will. You can love even when you don't like. And Jary, I think you're exactly right in that if there's someone that you find that you really do not love or you don't even like, then you just begin to pray. And I think, Robin, you're right and correct too, because then God begins to show you your own heart and the ways in which you don't have it together. It's very humbling to wake up in the morning and God has appeared or worked and you're just aware of your own brokenness. It's hard not to be kind to other people when you're aware how kind God's been to you in spite of your stuff. So, all right. So, when you're behaving as if you love someone, you will presently come to love him. Maybe, maybe not. But I do think that it doesn't change the demand. All right, let's think about love a second. I think it's pretty cool. The greatest of these is love. Okay, so you have faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. The end of the love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13. Faith. So we have faith in what we do not yet see. We're convinced it's true, and it's true even though we don't quite see it yet. But faith, someday we will never have. We will no longer need faith. We'll have sight. Hope. We hope, and that's our next section. I'm really looking forward to getting into that. We have hope. Our hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. It's viewing the future and living now in light of then. But at some point, our hope will be realized. The thing that endures for all of eternity of those three is simply love. So that which is greatest is love because it continues now, and that will be that which characterizes our Christianity more above all things. It won't be doctrinal purity because we'll have Jesus. It won't be missionary zeal because that will be done. It will be love. And if at no other point in our lives we will love, and we will not be able not to love. I have a friend I was talking to yesterday. She was one of my youth group kids. I can still picture the first day I saw her. She was 5 years old, and I knocked on her door. Her older brother was in my youth group, and she's got these big green eyes. Now she's, I guess, 40-something. 4 children, married, living in France. She's missionaries in France. Well, they just came back to the States. And we were talking yesterday, and I asked her about her mother. Her mother has dementia. And I don't think she'd mind me telling you, but her mom has dementia. And she said, this is the first time in my mom's life that she's ever had peace. She is the happiest woman this is the happiest I've ever seen her. Isn't that crazy? So there'll be a day, and so for her, because I said, man, I'm so sorry. She said, yeah, I miss my mom. She said she saw her mom. She hadn't seen her for a few years because she'd been gone. And when her brothers took her to see her mom, brought mom over to her house, mom didn't recognize us. Mom, do you know who this is? And mom said, no, who is this? And then Katie started to talk. And as soon as Katie started to talk, she said, oh, Katie, isn't that cool? Yeah, so then there was the recognition. But she said, as much as I miss my mom, I'm just thrilled that she's happy. Huh, isn't that wild? So there'll be a day when whatever we are now, we're going to move to love. We're going to be all right. And the hatred that we feel or the anger that we feel, the despising maybe that we feel, we've got some friends that they're so hurt by people that it's hard for them to even like people. But they're going to love. And so our job then, our privilege, and he's going to get there next, is that we might love. Whenever we do good to another self, that's another person, he likes the term self, just because it is a self made like us by God. So whenever you do that which is right to someone else because they're made in the image of God, if he were speaking English, that's what he would have said, and desiring its own happiness as we desire ours. Remember, we're wanting what is good for that person. We shall have learned to love it a little more, or at least to dislike it less. Remember Great Divorce? If you know the premise of the story is what is hell? You get to this place, and there's lots of space, and because you so despise people, you move further and further and further away. And the more you move away, the more transparent you become and the less human. And the tragedy of hell is the breaking of relationship so that you're finally just isolated. And the glory of heaven is the community of those who seek to do that which is greatest for each other because of the one who has sought to do which is greatest for us. Though he says it's quite distinct from affection, it leads to affection. Maybe. Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe in his book it did, and maybe it does. But our goal is, because Scripture calls us to, is to treat others as we would treat ourselves. That's actually a pretty cool concept. I think we tend to do that. I think we look at the world through our eyes, and so when people do things for us, I think we tend to interpret it by how we would respond. Like, I would never do that to somebody else. But from their perspective, it may have a different meaning than ours. So look around and we say, who is it, who are we with? And how would I want to be treated? And what can I do for them? Even if I don't really want to do it. That's a pretty cool way. There's a selflessness, and I think that's where the Spirit of God then comes alongside and says, yeah, that was kind of cool, wasn't it? Yeah, that was all right. All right, so the difference then between Christian and non-Christian charity. The difference between a Christian and a worldly man, not women, but men, is not that the worldly person has only affections or likings and the Christian has only charity. It's not like they only have affections and we only have love. Rather, the worldly person treats certain people kindly because he likes them. That's the tendency anyway. The Christian, trying to treat everyone kindly, finds himself liking more and more people as he goes on, including, including people he could not have imagined himself liking at the beginning. Here it says, here's the difference. The difference is because we are striving to love, our circle of those whom we love is growing. I've told you at Westminster, I really am there for the kids. Kids will ask me about some of the other teachers. There are teachers at Westminster I've never even met. I'm not in their circle. I don't see them. And that hit me that there are some teachers that I'm not really very fond of. And then I think, what's my problem? Like, what's wrong with me? So I've made it a concerted effort to get to know teachers I don't know. There's only a handful of them because teachers come and go. They might only be there the first or second year. I've got my hands full with a bunch of kids. And so I'm making a concerted effort to get to know them, and then those who I have sort of written off. I never write off kids, but I write off adults. And I'm trying to unwrite them off and saying, all right, what would be a more appropriate way to treat them? And it would be love. And, some of them I still don't necessarily like, and they probably don't like me. Life goes on. And if I feel like if you're not kind to children, our specific children at Westminster, I tend to write you off pretty quickly. But I'm trying to do it differently. And what he says is, as we do that, we'll find our world enlarging. That's kind of cool. The more cruel you are, and this is what he does. Remember what he does about morality? It's step by step. The more cruel you are, the more you will hate. And the more you hate, the more cruel you will become. And so on in a vicious cycle forever. Good and evil both increase at compound interest. That is why little decisions you and I make every day are of such infinite importance. So today, find the person you don't like and love them. And just do something, however small. This is where I think Lewis is very practical.
They're doing the Random Act of Kindness Day in Missouri. It's been signed into law. I just heard on the radio coming in. August 31st, Random Act of Kindness.
August 31st is Random Act of Kindness Day. The rest, it's like purge. You can kill everyone else all the other days. Just August 31st, you got to be kind. It's kind of weird when you legislate it. Yeah.
But they're just encouraging the other states to follow suit just because.
Yeah, it's interesting.
To go out and do something nice for some.
I mean, legislating it, I guess it's better than random acts of violence.
Right.
We'll do that on September 24th. But it's really, Lewis's point, it's really Christians that can do this because it's the Spirit of God who is love who moves in us. This is not something we do. It's something God does. And I think as you are moving towards someone you really don't like, there is that prayer that says, God, move in my heart because I don't want to. And I think the Spirit does. I think that's the joy.
But this might be one of those situations where if you do the act, the heart will follow. Like if you do a random act of kindness and you realize that it brings you as much joy as it does the other person,
Right. She's saying
you'll
it.
be inclined to do it more.
You're talking about Missouri.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you do something, your heart will follow. Maybe. The problem I would say, I think generally in culture that is true. The problem is when you're fallen and your heart hasn't been changed, there's a limit. But I would still rather that. So I think that would be, rather than the promotion really of holiness, that would be the slowing down of evil.
Right.
And so in doing that, what you are saying is let's be aware. Bob, and then I think hands are up. We'll do lady. Go ahead and then.
That was a good law. I don't know anything about it until now, but think of the ramifications around the rest of the country because a lot of people are going to start talking about it, thinking about it. So it's really a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly can't hurt. Bob's saying that this is a good thing. Yeah. Treat your neighbor kindly. In traffic, smile. Yeah. Yeah. Do what? Or, well, lift all of them.
There's more road rage today than ever has been.
Well, it makes more sense. Makes sense. At least we don't have 5-day traffic jams like they do in China. Have you read about some of those? Where they're just the whole city shuts down and nobody can move and they're stuck in their trucks for days? Can you imagine? We'd go crazy. I wouldn't because I'm spiritually healthy, but the rest of you might. Yes, ma'am.
I smile because legislation getting to be passed, and maybe the base of that legislation is really what we see in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't say what a biblical worldview is to behave or to follow.
Right.
But if you legislate it, then people might be more prone to.
Yeah. Yeah, she's talking about the legislation of it. But I would rather that law pass than some others. So, yeah. And this is an opportunity. Let's say you're Missouri and you have a church. Then you take that particular day and you make it a big day of service to the neighborhood. There's a church that was a church plant, and they didn't invite people to church. They didn't talk about Jesus. What they did is they went to all the 7-Elevens in their neighborhood, and on once a week they'd go over there on Saturdays, I think, and just say, "Can we clean your bathrooms?" That was it. They didn't wear any church signs. They didn't wear anything. And you know, the first couple of weeks nobody asked, and then little by little people just started, who are you guys? And that became their means. So it was these not so random acts of kindness that began to open doors to people's hearts. That's pretty cool. You know, so when you're done class here, if you guys will, well, the bathrooms aren't done yet, so we can't use them. Let's see. So the smallest act. So with morality, he says it's these little things. Here he's saying it's these little. The smallest good act today is the capture of a strategic point from which a few months later you may be able to go on to victories you never dreamed of. If you want to start walking, you start walking. But I can only walk 10 steps. Well, then tomorrow do 11. You start where you are, however small, however insignificant it feels. If you want to save money, just start saving money. Little by little, and then it grows. Ask yourself, if I were sure that I loved God, what would I do? Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe this is where you get the what would Jesus do, but that's not quite good enough. It's a start. It's really what has Jesus done and what's he done in me. But treat others as you would be treated. So it's a very simple message when we tell our kids in kindergarten. Everything I learned in kindergarten. What's that? But everything I needed to know, I learned in kindergarten. Big seller about 25 years ago. What's that? Yes, Fulgham, exactly. Christian love, either towards God or towards man, is an affair of the will. Think about that. Then he jumps it and he says, even loving God is an affair of the will. Like, you can love God and not like God. Right? A lot of things God does where you think, that's not very kind. But I do love you. I choose as a matter of the will to serve and obey and submit myself to you, but I don't think you treat me very nicely right now. He will give us feelings of love if he pleases. Now that one I agree with. They may come, they may not. We cannot create them for ourselves, and we must not demand them as a right. We just love people because it's what we're called to do. Of all people in the world, I have a kid at Westminster who she's now in college, but she says I flirt all the time. And I'm not a flirt. I don't know how to flirt, really. But when we go to stores, like on trips, I talk to everyone who I meet, like in a store. We go to Walmart and buy food. And she'll say, see, you're flirting with them. I'll say, little brassy. I say, I'm not flirting with them. I'm just talking to them. But it is interesting to get people, once you get beyond the veneer of I'm doing a job and people are like normal people, people are so much fun. And so even that's just a random act of kindness. And then she'll make fun of me and she'll sit in the background going, stop it. But here it is. We have the privilege of serving others. And that would be acts of love. And then he ends with what I think is the most important part that he doesn't really talk about, but it is important. The great thing to remember is that though our feelings come and go, his love for us does not. This is what it's founded on. God loves us. We love because he first loved us. It's not wearied by our sins or our indifference, and therefore it is quite relentless in its determination that we shall be cured of those sins at whatever cost to us, at whatever cost to him. So God has set the pattern, God has given the power, and God has given us our marching orders. He loves us even when we're not very likable. His actions towards us are always in love. On August 8th, I'm going to preach on Psalm 100. And I will make the confession that I chose it because it's only 5 verses long. But it's all about God's love. It's not all about. Half of it's about God's loving faithfulness from generation to generation. And so that God has given us the pattern, and he's given us the power. And so that we have the privilege, not the responsibility, we have the privilege to love in a way that others who don't know Christ cannot. All right, that's his section on love. And then we'll move to hope, unless there's some statements here. We're doing all right. Anything? Yes, ma'am.
He talks a lot about that we really love ourselves.
Yes.
But I don't know that everyone loves themselves.
Okay, so that's good, Shirley. Shirley says Lewis talks about loving ourselves, but I don't know if a lot of people really do. Here's what I think. I think ultimately people may not like themselves, but I think down at their core, people want to survive. Now, people do commit suicide, but I think when they do that, they've lost rationality for a little while. But I think generally people because we're selfish, we want to protect ourselves. And so in defining love in that sense, it would be probably a twisted, depraved love. But we really do protect ourselves. Even someone who doesn't like themselves will defend themselves, will make sure they get food, even if other people don't get food. They might steal. And so their needs become more important than others. So he's seeing it. Remember, he goes back and forth between special revelation and general. And what he's saying, if you look around, generally people, and he uses the words love, even though it's not the biblical idea, people will really protect themselves and make themselves the priority. Like you combed your hair this morning. You didn't comb mine. How come? I was there waiting for you.
I think you said you may not like yourself, but you love yourself.
Yeah, you care for yourself in certain ways. All right, you want to go to hope? Let's at least start it. It may get us to next week, but let's go. I really like this section. As I read it, it was pretty convicting because I thought, well, maybe I'm a Christian, maybe not. Because he really sets up a good way to live. Defining hope. Hope is a continual looking forward to the eternal world. That's hope. Remember, the way that most people conceive of hope is maybe yes, maybe no. I hope it doesn't rain on Saturday. But the Christian idea of hope is an anchor, Hebrews. It's something that is true, that is consistent, that is verifiable, that is believable. And so hope is not something you hope for. Hope is something that you know is going to come. You just don't have it yet. And so that's where our hope lies. Not when we die, we hope we go to heaven. That's a horrible, you talk to people and they think that way. Like, I hope I was good enough to go to heaven. Well, you weren't. And it's a horrible way to live. But here is, hope is the awareness, the surety that you are going to go to heaven. So my mom just turned 92 2 weeks ago. Her mom lived to be 100. So she's got, maybe some years. But she certainly outlived most of her friends. And she's pretty comfortable with, I don't know how many days I have left. And so I sometimes feel old, and then I look at my mom and I feel really young. And then I look at the high schoolers and I feel really old again. But you have no guarantee. But my mom is convinced of the truthfulness of scriptures so that when she dies, she already knows. It's not, as some modern people think, a form of escapism or wishful thinking. But one of the things a Christian is meant to do. Escapism, saying that there's a better world. Like, what was I reading? A lady was talking about somebody who died. I'm trying to think what I was reading. And they said they've gone to their reward. And you'll hear non-Christians talk like, that's a Christian statement, the reward. But non-Christians will talk about heaven, but they really don't have any solid hope in it. Everyone wants it to be true, but if you talk to people about it, if you're good, more good than you are bad, then you go to this heaven. But it's not this awareness that this is only temporary and that is eternal. Do you think that way? I'm asking you because I don't. Like my feet are firmly planted on planet Earth. And as I read this, I thought, all right, I've got to be planted here on Earth, but I've got to understand I'm passing through, and I don't think in those terms. As I'm beginning to, after all the divorce and stuff, see if I can ever retire before I'm 90, and I'm putting some of these pieces together. I'm so aware of this, and then every once in a while it will hit me. I have no guarantees about anything, tomorrow even. And so I'm putting my hope on this, but our hope is really on that. Now, the negative can be that you forget about here, and then it becomes escapism. So I had a friend who said she was never going to get married, and all she was going to do is tell people about Jesus because this wasn't her home. Well, you can't live that way. I think that's irresponsible as well. One of the things I appreciate about a Reformed theology is since everything you do is an act of worship, you enjoy here as well. You enjoy food, you can enjoy wine, you can enjoy music. There are things you can enjoy. There's a fullness to life. So it's not escapism. It's not wishful thinking. It's something that is real and true and there. It does not mean that we are to leave the present world as it is. Here's going to be his point. If you're going to make a difference in this world, the only people who make a difference in this world are those who realize that their hope is in the other world. And once you've realized that this is your hope, then you can be useful here because this isn't it. There's something greater, and now I can serve others here. It's actually very cool. So the practical benefit of hope. If you read history, you'll find that the Christians who did most for the present world were just those who thought most of the next. So you would think if you're thinking about over there, you would be they'll say, well, heavenly minded, so no earthly good. I remember my mom used to say that. That person is so heavenly minded, they're of no earthly good. And what Lewis is saying, it's just the opposite. If you're heavenly minded, you are earthly good. So because Bob is heavenly minded, he's beginning to work on this trafficking stuff. Because you understand the eternity that comes with Christ now matters. So what you do matters because there's an eternity that comes after this. The apostles themselves who set on foot the conversion of the Roman Empire, the great men who built up the Middle Ages, this is top of page 5, the English evangelicals who abolished the slave trade and left their mark on earth precisely because their minds were occupied with heaven. It is since Christians have largely ceased to think of the other world that they have become so ineffective in this. And we're going to talk about this. Aim at heaven and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you'll get neither. That's a great line. So what he's saying is if you get so wrapped up here, then if this is all you've got, this is all you work for. But if you understand that one, then you could look at this earth in the right way and now serve this earth because you're preparing for that one. And that's your hope. Give me some responses to that, because that shook me up in a good way. Yes, sir, Bob. Uh-huh.
It took him his whole lifetime to see the slave trade abolished.
Yes. He's talking about Wilberforce moving towards the slave trade. And yeah, it took him his whole life, but he was willing to do that. And say, if kids, a couple years ago, the phrase was, the high school kids every year have different words. A couple years ago, it was YOLO. You only live once. And so and then they have another one, FOMO, fear of missing out. And so if your life is only here, YOLO, so you get everything you can get. FOMO, don't miss anything. If there's a party, you don't want to miss it. And so everything is so governed here that you don't have time for things that are larger because you don't want to miss out. But if we understand we're not going to miss out because the real party isn't until later, now we can miss out. So my parents went to Africa for 16 years. My mom was all of, 23 years old, maybe? And my dad had just gotten back from World War II, and they went out in 1950. And you say, well, that set the course of their lives financially, career-wise, But Jim Elliot, remember Jim Elliot, one of the guys who goes down to the Indians near Quito, Shalha. He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. That's the coolest, that's the best quote maybe ever. And so you understand what you cannot lose, and therefore you're willing to give up here. Why are Christians willing to die for their faith? Because of their hope. Why are they willing to give up everything they have? Because of their hope. And whatever it is we give up, man, it comes, he likes the term compound interest. Think what's waiting. Any responses to that? I just think that's so good. All right. When we make other things, this is C on page 5. When we make other things other than hope central. It seems a strange rule, but something like it can be seen at work in other matters. Health is a great blessing, but the moment you make health one of your main direct objects, you start becoming a crank and imagining there's something wrong with you. He's saying anything that you obsess on overly now owns you, and there's not a freedom. So I had a friend who bought a new car, and I thought the greatest thing that could happen to that car is if somebody scratched it. And then he wouldn't have to worry about getting his car scratched. I have a friend who had this nice car. He got it painted like the Dolphins colors and all. And so he would never park in a parking lot. He'd always find a place way out, like so there's no cars anywhere around. And it was funny. His car looks great for years, but you know you're kind of obsessed with the car. He would just say he's taking care of it, which is true. You are only likely to get health provided you want other things more: food, games, work, fun, open air. In the same way, we'll never save civilization as long as civilization is our main object. So we can look beyond things and then come back and enter. So notice what he's doing. Christianity has to be involved in the real world. But it's only involved in the real world when it understands that there's a realer world. Lewis has written that book, Till We Have Faces. And it's all about what you see here, but the reality behind what you see. That there's always a greater reality. There's a world that you can't see, but it's there. And though you can't. So I tell high school kids, I said, guys, if you could see the other dimension, angels and demons, I said, they're all around us. There's a bigger reality. And I said, you've probably all seen angels because they take on human form and they love to minister among us. You just don't know it. And it's becoming aware of this other world that is there that is just as real. Read the end of The Last Battle, again, Lewis, where he describes the real Narnia. He said, this Narnia looked a lot like it, except it's bigger and the colors are brighter. And he said, it's like the first day of Christmas vacation or summer vacation every day. And all of our friends are there. And their parents who are killed are there. Their uncle is there. Everybody's there. And they're reunited with everybody. And he's saying that motivates you for now. That's pretty cool. So I don't have to go home and think about this some more. And so he says, we must learn to want something else even more. What is it we want? Rest in peace. We want to be with Jesus. So it looks like what happens to Paul in 2 Corinthians. Remember where he talks about the guy who dies? And then he goes up to like the third heaven. Their world had, as they understood heaven, it was third heaven. There's the sky that you see, that's the first heaven. The second would be where the stars are. The third heaven would be where the gods live. And so Paul uses a world view that they would have understood and said, I know this guy. I think what happened is Paul got stoned to death. I think he was killed. And he went to heaven. He came before the presence of God, however that means. And Jesus reveals to him, you know, he says we see in a mirror dimly, but I think Jesus reveals to him some things. And then he says, sorry, buddy, but you're going back. He says, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. I think for Paul, he had gotten a taste of what it was going to be. There's a cartoon. What's the one with the prehistoric, and it's got this little squirrel. And the little squirrel is always chasing the acorns. Ice Age. And he gets killed. And as he dies, he's at the very entrance to heaven. And he's all excited, and then all of a sudden it draws him back into the real world. He's all upset.
Is that because squirrels don't go to heaven?
What's that?
Says that because squirrels don't go to heaven?
Oh, in my world they do. They'll be all around us as we sit in the parks and play Frisbee and sing Kumbaya and drink Cuban coffee. So I think Paul understood it's real. Like, I'm not real comfortable with stories of people who have died and come back. I don't know their stories, but they always describe God as sort of grandfatherly. But who knows? But but it is interesting when you hear stories of people who have died. You know, what have they seen and what's there? And some of the stories, there's some similarities. I have no idea what's really going on, except we do believe absent in the body, present with the Lord. And so when we do a funeral, it's not the end, it's the beginning. When Moody, there was a rumor that he had died, and he said, you know, when you hear that I have died, he was alive, but he said, when you have died, realize I have not died, I'm more alive than I've ever been. Isn't that cool? So we must learn to want something else even more. So you can appreciate this because this isn't all there is. You can be okay with this because this isn't all there is. And so I saw a commercial last night. We were watching the basketball game, and it's for, I don't have any idea what it's for, but it's a father feeding a special needs child. I'm not sure why they showed it. It felt a little manipulative, but maybe not. And then at the end, he's rolling on the ground, loving this little kid. And the kid's smiling, and it's actually a pretty cool shot. But as I watched it, I thought, and someday that child will be healthy again. Someday all things will be restored. And so it's wanting something even more. And so we can survive what we have now. I'm further along in the story than I have left to play. Most of us find it difficult to want heaven at all, except insofar as heaven means meeting again our friends who have died. But he's saying, no, that's when it begins. Now, do we believe that? Do we talk about that? Do we think in those terms of heaven being the beginning and that life is expendable here? Not that we give our, you'd say, well, then why don't we just commit suicide? Because that's a misunderstanding of life as God has given us. I think this world really is a preparation for eternity. Eternity has begun. Eternity doesn't begin. It has begun. But this is just the birth pangs of eternity as we're becoming more like Christ. So why is it sometimes difficult to foster hope? One reason for this difficulty is that we have not been trained. Our whole education tends to fix our minds on this world. Like I'd say Westminster, it sounds horrible, but we fix our kids' minds on this world. Even though we're a Christian school, it's about, where are you going to go to college and what career you're going to have. And kids will tell me the cars they want to buy and how many homes they want to own. Because most of them come from money, so they expect to have money. And that really becomes the driving force. But it's not just them, it's us. And so we haven't been trained to think about. You wonder if you live in a culture where you don't have much. Is it easier to think about heaven? I'm asking because I don't have any idea. Like I think I live simply, and then when I'm quiet, I can hear my TV going as I'm on my computer with the dishwasher and the washer dryer in the background. I think, well, isn't that simple? Yes, ma'am, you're thinking.
Me, yeah, I think it is easier. Because I think sometimes when you're taken to the limit of your resources, then you cry out. And if you have abundant resources, then you're not always in that position to experience that.
Either that or you're angry that you don't have it. I mean, look at all the people wanting to come to the U.S. Because even though we've got our issues, I'd sure rather live here than most of Central and South America. And I will send my children unaccompanied to the wall, hoping they'll get in. It's a crazy, crazy willingness to give up a future because you're hoping for something better. I think it does lead us towards simplicity in life, though. How much is enough? What I've got's enough. I wanted to buy a pair of sneakers this week. I'll be right there, Jerry. And I didn't because I looked in my closet and I thought, I have enough. I like them. They're comfortable, but the other ones will wear out and then I'll get them. Yes, sir.
Resources, distractions. When you've got a different set of distractions if you don't have.
Correct.
How am I going to feed my family?
Correct.
Should I go steal or should
Yeah, Jerry's talking about not having stuff. And he says, with stuff you have distractions. If you don't have stuff, you have other distractions. How am I going to feed my family? Am I going to steal? Yeah, that's good. So it is an issue of the heart. either way. Yeah, it is interesting that you can have people who are very wealthy and they seem to have made peace with it, and people who are very wealthy and who haven't. Then people who aren't wealthy who have made peace with it, and those who haven't. How much do you need? Enough is enough. I sold a car this week, and as I was selling this car to a guy, a young guy, the guy didn't speak English, but his young nephew was the sort of the go-between, and he looked at my other cars that I have, my kids' cars, and he says, "You like old cars?" And I thought, yeah, all of our cars are 20 years or... The newest car we have is a 2008. And then the other's a 97, a 99. And I was a little embarrassed. You like old cars. And I found myself trying to explain away why I have old cars. But that's a lifestyle choice. So it's living simply. Nothing wrong with new cars. Absolutely none. I was walking the dogs today, and I went by this house, and it had these two monster trucks, just monster. And in my brain, I was trying to figure out how much must they cost a month. And they may make millions of dollars, and so it's not really an issue. But I couldn't make that choice. And it's not my choice to make. I'd be embarrassed even to drive that truck. I'd get out of it like hoping nobody sees me. But it's fine. It's moving so things aren't distractions. A house isn't bad. Big house, not bad. Is it a distraction? Little house could be a distraction because you're always wishing you had a bigger house. It's an issue that says, because my hope is in this, I'm content here. You hear stories of people who live on 10% of what they make and give away 90%. That's pretty cool. I couldn't do that, but others can. And so however it works out for you, it may work out differently. I'm sorry, yes, sir.
You talk about contentment. Remember, Paul said, I learned contentment.
Yes. He's saying Paul learned contentment. Talking about contentment. Yeah, and even the verse that says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, it's really a verse about money, even though we take it out of context all the time. But he's talking about people giving him money, and he says, whether you give or don't give, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And it's that same idea of contentment. If I have a lot, I'm okay. If I don't have a lot, I'm okay. I went on vacation a couple years ago, and this is when I first was separated. So it's been 15 years ago now. I didn't have any money in my bank account. I mean, absolutely none. So everything was on credit card. But I wanted my kids to go on vacation. And that was, like we went out to eat, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to help pay for this? There's a group of us, and I thought I really can't tell anybody. I feel too stupid. But it's learning to be, figure out how do I deal with this, whether I have a lot or not a lot. But my hope is put on something else. Another reason, number 2 on page 5, another reason is that when the real want for heaven is present in us, we do not recognize it. Now, this is good. What he's going to say is all of us have this longing for heaven. We just don't know it. Here's what he says. Most people, if they'd really learned to look into their own hearts, would know that they do want and want acutely something that cannot be had in this world. Now, this is so good. This is a good part. We'll do this part, and then we'll be done here. Then we'll pick this up next week. Our longings and hope. Okay, so here's the nature of our longings. This is where we're going to stop after 1. There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you. That is hope. But they never quite keep their promise. His argument is this. Everything you've got never quite lives up to its billing. So you buy that new house. Yeah, but then you got to fix it. Or you get into that perfect relationship and it's not. Or you get the degree from that college and there's still stuff. The longings which arise in us when we first fall in love, or first think of some foreign country, or first take up some subject that excites us, are longings which no marriage, no travel, no learning can really satisfy. They're moving us that way, but there's always something missing. I'm not speaking of what would be ordinarily called unsuccessful marriages or holidays or learned careers. I'm speaking of the best possible ones. There was something we grasped at in that first moment of longing, which just fades away in the reality. The reality can never match what we think. Why? Because these longings are good and real and appropriate, but they're longings for something greater. We're longing for another country, as Hebrews 11 talks about Abraham, and he's looking for a country not made by hands, whose author and finisher is God. And so he's looking for something more. I think everyone knows what I mean. Remember, he's talking to non-Christians, and he's saying that job will never satisfy you. Now, it doesn't mean the job's not good, but it can't give you ultimate meaning. Boy, have you read about this football player? I won't even say his name, who just got arrested this week, and he was breaking into his in-laws' house. And here's a guy that's made millions of dollars by whatever standards you want to use. He's a great athlete. He's outspoken. He's highly educated. He's fun to listen to, and his world just caved in. I have no idea what happened. He went on a drinking binge for 2 or 3 days, and then he fell apart, and now he's got 5 different charges against him. And he's saying how remorseful he is. By our standards, if we could be professional football players and make millions of dollars, have the education, go where he went, most people would say, I'd be satisfied. And it didn't satisfy. There's something more. Those things aren't bad, but in and of themselves, the new car can't satisfy. It can for a little while, and then there's a newer car. Everything you look at, there's always something you think, oh. And what he's saying is all these things are pointing to something greater. The wife may be a good wife, and the hotels and scenery may have been excellent, and chemistry may be very interesting, but something else has evaded us. And he said there's so much more to the story. Now what he's going to do is say, how do we deal with these things? And that's where we'll pick up next week. So, love, act of the will. Love those you don't necessarily like. And perhaps God in his kindness will give you affection for them. Hope, understanding that what we see isn't all there is. It doesn't make this any less valuable. In fact, it makes it more valuable. Because what we see is a picture of what will be. The themes are the same. The categories are the same. It's just there will be the completion of this. This is the trailer to the movie. That is the movie. And so you get to know the characters. You get to know the plot. But there's the completion. And as you understand that there's the completion, you can now come here and enjoy whatever it is you have for however long you have it. Isn't it amazing how quickly we live and die? We don't live very long. I mean, we were looking at pictures from Dairy Queen. And there was a picture on the wall, and it was from 1940, and my comment was, everybody in that picture has died. That's not even that long ago. And they're all gone. They have to be, because they were all adults, and that was, 60, 80 years ago. There were no children in there. So my guess, and then we were wondering how many of them, there are a bunch of young men too. It was in the Midwest somewhere, and we were wondering how many of those guys fought in World War II. It was interesting to think about their lives, but they're over. And if there is no hope, what's Paul say? If there is no resurrection, we above all people are to be pitied. If for only this life we live, then you got to go for the gusto, because it's all you got. But even, Lewis says, even as you go for that and you look for meaning here, you'll just never be quite satisfied. There's going to be a longing for more. Why? Because that's how God's created us. We want what we can't have. And you're always tasting and seeking and searching and looking until, what's the old Augustine quote? You know, my heart was restless until I found my rest in you. This God-shaped vacuum they talk about. And it's setting our hearts on that in order that we can enjoy this. All right, comments, and then we'll talk about this more next week and pick it up. Chris wrinkles her eyes because she's serious.
I just feel like there's this teeter-totter between contentment and satisfaction, where lack of satisfaction drives us to do better for ourselves, for our kids, but yet we still have to have a contentment somewhere that we're not 100% focused on the next.
All right, so she says satisfaction drives us to do better for ourselves and our kids, but contentment. Well, but even you're saying do better for your kids. How do you define that? Like my kids have had everything they've needed, but our house is small, and their cars are used. If you go to their friends' houses, I walk in sometimes and I'll say, I remember saying to Ransom one day, Ransom, I'm sorry, I can't give you this. Yeah. And he looked at me and said, I don't want this. I thought, thank you.
Exactly.
So, but what I'm saying is, I as a parent thinking I would satisfy them more if I gave them more, And my son, more mature than I am, is content with what we have.
Right, and that's like,
So,
and growing up, we lived down in, I guess it's called Miami Heights now, 117th Avenue and US 1. I went to Mays Junior High for 7th grade. And my dad was not satisfied with the education we were getting there. So my mom was a teacher, you know, my dad was a retired police officer. So he worked off-duty jobs so they could have enough money to buy the house that he lives in now. And when we moved into that house, mom said to us, you're going to be going to school with doctors and lawyers' kids, and they're going to have things that you don't have, and we can't give that to you. So learning to be content with
Yeah.
that has been a struggle for me because half of my life I felt like I was second class. And I'm trying to realize that even though I may not have had all of the jeans and clogs and whatever cars that they had growing up, that it doesn't make me less.
No.
To find that
See, and that's, she's saying that she grew up in a world where she didn't have a lot of stuff to people that she went to school with. And so contentment has been difficult. See, I grew up the opposite. We didn't have any money at all, but I had no idea. It just never even crossed my mind. So my parents, I think, did a good job of being content. And I think that's the goal. Like, we drove up next to this Porsche one day. Again, I'm with Ransom. And I said, man, that's a good-looking car. And he looked at me and said, Dad, it's just a car. I thought, yes, my master. So contentment's pretty cool. Because God provides. You can't always get what you want. Remember, that should be the Rolling Stones. Come on. But if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need. And God's provided everything that you need. All that I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is your faithfulness. So our goal is to learn to be content. And you know what? The hope is that both now and for eternity, your needs will be taken care of. Man, as a missionary kid, I've got a list of these things. I think I've got 35 things listed where God's just provided. Just miraculously. And I wouldn't trade that. Even though there have been times where I think, I don't know how I'm going to pay this bill. I'm not going to, but my kids are all through private education, high school and college. No debt. I own a home. I have cars. I've got enough cars now that I'm selling cars. Because the kids don't, they've moved on to different things. Oh, they're great too. Yeah. What's that? Well, we got to the point where we had, the three kids, and then I got the old Jeep, so we had 5 cars sitting around. And Shafe went to New York; he didn't need a car anymore, so then we have an extra car. So we sold one, and then I sold this white one because I got my mom's car. So we had 6 cars. We don't need 6 cars. That's crazy. So, because I was at the point where I had no cars. Yes, ma'am, Shirley, and then we'll pray.
Well, I do think about this section, that I think of contentment, and I believe that being close to the Lord, we're close to the Lord, I believe we are, makes a big difference.
Yes.
In talking to
Saying being close to the Lord moves you towards contentment.
talking to my sister, she no longer goes to church, she lives in DeLand, she's a little older than me, she's very worried about aging and staying in her house. However, I'm not. So I said, just live, today you're okay.
Right. Today you're okay.
It's not okay. But anyway, but you see, if she were closer to the Lord, I think, it might help her not to worry, right?
Well, clearly that's Matthew. Don't worry about, a couple things. Don't worry about tomorrow. Today has enough to take care of itself. And if the grass in the field is taken care of and the sparrows, won't he take care of you? I was following a sparrow around at campus the other day. And it was, our kids drop a bunch of food. So I was watching them eat all the food, and I was thinking about that chapter, that, man, God knows your name, and he knows when you were born, and he knows when you will die. If he does that for this little dude, he does that for us. And she doesn't have that confidence.
She's more nervous.
Then you're on your own. And the bummer about aging is it doesn't stop. You don't get a timeout. Yeah. All right, anything else? Joanne, you hadn't said anything today. What's the problem?
Well, I was just thinking.
Here we go. Final words
Okay.
from the doctor.
I immigrated with my parents.
Say that again.
I immigrated with my
She immigrated with her parents.
and they didn't have nothing.
How old were you when you guys came?
60.
16.
And I went to work. It was 60, you didn't have to go back to school, so you go to the
So she went to work.
cookie factory
And where'd you live?
in Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids,
Yes.
where all the Dutch people in the world are.
Yeah, at that time. And they did not have nothing, when they came here, and yet the Lord provided so much for my parents, for
Yep.
us, through a sponsor. He bought a house for us, big old house, and then they were able to pay it
So-
back slowly.
A sponsor bought them a house.
Yeah, and they had gotten the furniture from the church members. That,
Oh, yeah.
like we have done here for the Cuban, we give you
Yeah.
furniture.
Everyone's got extra furniture they want to get rid of. Yes.
And it was wonderful. And my parents were always very amazed, happy that how the Lord provided. And, I even feel that way. I mean,
Yes.
when Dirk and I started our life together, we did not have much. We first had to help our parents. So at the end, they helped us to start. But
Yeah.
now I'm amazed at what I have and I'm content. And yet, if I look at other people, they have much more nicer homes and stuff. But it makes a difference.
Nicer homes are overrated. I'm being serious. I don't care what your house is, just if you like it. If you're comfortable in your house, huge or not huge. I always look at a huge house and I always think, because I clean my own house and I think, yeah, someone's got to clean it. And so I like having a little house that I can clean easily. And others would look at my house and say, well, that's awfully small. Yeah, whatever. So cool. Contentment's pretty nice, isn't it? And you've had everything you've needed. Your husband you met where? Up in Grand Rapids? Okay. Ah, he had his eye on you. Oh, look at her. Did you speak any English when you came?
I had English in high school, but that was English. When you come here, that's American.
It wasn't slang American.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it helped. I could read.
You could read his love letters?
Oh, yes.
Very good. I want to hear this story. When we go get pizza, I'll hear this story.
During the Korean War in the army. So but the Lord did not send him over to Korea. To Alaska he went. So it was wonderful.
Very good. All right, well, we'll pick this up. I want to think through some more on this today. I think the whole idea of hope as a grounding force in our lives is pretty exciting. So let's pray. Lord, thank you for time together, for our stories, even as we've shared some of them here. Pray for Shirley's sister, that she might have hope. If, going to church is a reaction to knowing Jesus, and we find that for some people, they think it's a substitute for knowing him. And so they're mad at God because they go to church and things still don't work out. And so wherever she is, I pray that you'd give her some peace. It's tough to be getting older. And just not to know, even about the present and the future. Remind us of our hope. And because of our hope, then we can love. We can, as they say in sports, you can leave it all out on the field. I mean, we can do everything here because it's not about glory. It's not about, bank accounts. It really is about service to others and lovingly giving ourselves. So I mentioned Bob and his work with the trafficking. And his concern for these young girls who are being used. Man, that's an act of love for others in here in the way they're serving that I don't know about. You know our hearts, and so move. For the service this morning, as Kent preaches, the singing, may all that bring you glory. It does because of Jesus. Give us joy. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys. I wasn't sure anybody was going to show up today.